Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to councillors and administrative staff assembled here in the quorum room. Welcome to members of the public in the gallery. Welcome to those who are joining on our Zoom platform and those who will watch later on our YouTube channel. I will call this regular meeting of Council of the Municipality of Jasper to order for June 16th, 2026. It is 1:31 p.m. Councillors, you have today's proposed agenda. Are there any additions, deletions, or other changes to be made to the agenda? Seeing nothing, I would look for a motion that Council approve the agenda for today's meeting as presented. Thank you, Councillor Melnick. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. We have some minutes before us today, not for approval, but for receipt. Those are minutes of the Legislative Committee meeting of June 2nd, 2026. And in fact, they are draft minutes because that committee has not yet met again to approve those minutes, but they are here for information, and I would look for a motion that Council receive those draft minutes of the June 2nd, 2026 Legislative Committee meeting for information. Councillor Hall, as chair of that committee, thank you for that motion. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. And we have two sets of minutes before us for approval, the first being the minutes of the regular meeting of June 2nd, 2026. Are there any errors, omissions, or corrections required to be made to those minutes? Seeing nothing, I would look for a motion that Council approve the minutes of the June 2nd, 2026 regular Council meeting as presented. Thank you, Councillor Waxer. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. And we also have before us the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting of June 9th, 2026. Are there any errors, omissions, or corrections required to be made to those minutes? Again, seeing nothing, I would look for a motion that Council approve the minutes of the June 9, 2026 Committee of the Whole meeting as presented. Councillor Roger, thank you. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. That takes us to agenda item 4, delegations. We have a scheduled delegation, the Jasper Racquet Club. Two folks coming forward. Thank you. And although I know you both, I will ask that you identify yourselves for the record, and please proceed with your presentation.
Oh, okay. My name's Anne Thomas, Secretary Treasurer of the Jasper Park Tennis Club.
And I'm Dennis, no title.
Director. So we are here today pursuing the vision with respect to the repaving of the 3 tennis courts and the creation of 3 new pickleball courts, which you kindly were in favor of last time we were here. What's happening now, and I think Dennis can give you a better overview than me, but generally speaking, we have come across a shortfall from the originally budgeted cost, which was done in fall of 24 to now. And so I'll leave that to Dennis to explain why, and then we'll go back to what we're asking today.
Well, explanation 2024 to today, obviously costs have gone up. Some unforeseen items that I probably didn't account for just based on the existing surface. So anyway, back then, I believe it was a $250,000 budget. Currently, I think we're sitting at around 3.25. So, obviously our goal is not to have this shortfall fall on taxpayers. And secondly, we are actively working towards getting our shortfall through fundraising. And we want to know really what our parameters are for fundraising. Mm-hmm. And when I say that, I guess we've been approached maybe on the possibility of maybe naming rights for the facility by a builder in town. And quite honestly, we had never even considered that. So that would be one thing that we're asking for sure. And what are our parameters? Are we allowed to perhaps name individual courts? Like if we're going to have 6 courts, can we have each court maybe as a company name, for example, instead of Court A or Court 1, just like you would have a meeting room, the Tonquin room or whatever. Are we able to do that? Are we able to perhaps, and I know this probably falls under Parks Canada's guidelines too, is maybe sell advertising maybe on the windscreens within the structure itself, not outside of it. But so we just want to know what and if we are able to do any of those type of things. I'd be happy to talk about the shortfall in the funds if you like, or take any questions on with respect to that as well. So we want to know what our parameters are, I guess.
Well, thank you both for that, and appreciate the work that you have done to date on this. Just so I can be clear, the shortfall is then about 75,000.
About 75, yeah. That's as of this morning. We took those costs, or they. When I say we, I'll say the committee that's working on it, which is consists of a project manager and an engineering firm. We don't anticipate anything too much bigger than or greater than that. We do have a contingency built in that. Those costs are based on the most recent costs that were done out of the town of Edson with the same sort of facility. So we're going to have more firm costs, or hopefully the only thing we're remaining is the paving. We do have the surface quote. We just need a current quote for paving, and we're hoping to get that next week.
All right, thank you for that. I am going to look to our CAO for a response. I will say that I think generally the parameters are quite broad, but we'll see where Mr. Given might lead us in his response.
Thanks very much, Mayor Ireland. Administration's recommendation, being that this is the first time the request has come to a public forum, would be for council to refer the request to administration for a report back. That way we'd be able to work with the tennis club to do maybe a better job of finalizing those last few things that are yet to come in. And then we can also check council's naming policy and provide an overview of what latitude's available to council, ultimately as a council policy, and so council can choose to do what it wishes. But there is a policy in place today that you should know about. So administration will work with the club to get maybe a closer resolution of the costs, and then we can provide some advice to you that would have a number that would be closer to what we would expect, and a bit of an overview of what the policy says and some alternatives for you.
Thank you for that, CAO Given. And just for the record, I think you're here as the Jasper Racquet Club, not the tennis club. Or are they interchangeable?
Thank you. The Jasper Park Tennis Club is the incorporated society through which the funds have been granted. The Jasper Racquet Club is the face to Jasper of our vision, because any racket sports, etc. So that's why there is a division. And I think it's easier to, well, we thought it was easier when we did start our campaign to call it the Racquet Club, because we're dealing with not just a tennis sport facility, but a racket facility. So that's why those two names.
All right, thank you for that. And as you heard from CAO, given the recommendation we have is to refer the matter to administration to work with the club to sort out what the parameters for fundraising might be. But you're here now, so I will turn it to councillors for questions they may have. Councillor Roger.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland, through you to the two members. A few months ago, somebody from your organization was here, and we were talking about if it's been investigated, if the sound of the pickleball has been tested from where you're going to have your court, perhaps to Southview. It was suggested maybe that somebody could whack a few balls back and forth just on the pavement, because I know that's been a problem in other areas, and just we don't want to build it and then find the problem later.
Mm-hmm.
I could probably answer that. There has been extensive tests done, I believe, by the University of British Columbia, I believe is the one that I read. And I believe I don't have it off the top of my head, but I know, Lori, when you had mentioned that to me once before, there was guidelines in place and sound testing, extensive sound testing done. And I still believe we're within those parameters with the distance given from the pickleball to the Southview. So if that's still a concern, I can certainly come back to this forum here again and have that study available. I don't have it right now.
Okay, well, that's good. I just wanted to make sure that it's been addressed. But so it sounds like it's been addressed, so that's fine. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I don't think we'll be any louder than the skateboarders, quite frankly. But yeah, and thank you for your help on this, because a lot of people have been coming up to all of our committee members and saying, when is this going to happen? When can I play? So people are quite excited about it, and they're willing to give a membership fee and help with any volunteer labor, that sort of thing. So we really want to move forward on this as soon as we can. We've done some fundraising to date, which has garnered us, say, under $10,000, but now we are going after some serious money, and so that's why we're here today.
Just a couple questions and comments to that too. In the event that we do exceed our fundraising, or not goal, because I think our goal is loftier than $75,000. Mm-hmm. We would like to see that those funds, if we do exceed that, maybe either to stay within the municipality's bank account designated for that facility for any ongoing maintenance or upgrades that we need. What we don't want to have is the asset, municipality have this nice asset, and then 10 years from now we're coming back to this table again asking for more money for upkeep. We'd rather charge our club members, a fee, an annual fee just for upkeep, because the goal would not be to have this asset and then come back every 5 years for more money. So that's our goal there. And secondly, Mr. Given, do we have a liaison within the administration when we going forward, or do we have to come back to this?
Yeah, Mayor Ireland, my expectation would be that Director Reed, who has responsibility for recreation facilities, would probably be your most likely one, or Angela. So that would be our typical approach.
Councillor Frechette and then Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. Through you to Mr. Safino and Miss Thomas, of course. I personally have a comment. I think the idea of and I don't know the policy, but the idea of selling courts to names is brilliant. I think it takes a new initiative that would certainly make your concerns about ever having to come back to look for more funds and whatnot. I think it's a novel concept. I think it's something that could bear fruit. I like the idea of getting our tennis racket facility and pickleball up to where it should be. I think I admire the initiative. Like I say, I would love to hear more about it, and it may well just be the beginning. And just a question to both of you: is there been any appetite in the business community for this type of thing?
Good.
So I think we initially started our fundraising efforts primarily not within, well, and I'll say local business community, the ones that we hit up every month. We were focusing it more on the contractors that are coming into town and building our homes and for all intents and purposes, taking money out of the community. So we approached, I don't know, upwards of, I'll say
20, 30.
30, 40 of them. We each had a list of 10 or 15. Out of my 10 or 15 that I followed up with on personal phone calls, I've had one, and I'd be happy to share that, but maybe not right now, but that actually said they're not interested in donating to Jasper. And that's a pretty big builder that's happening in town. And I was quite surprised by that. But all the rest of them, I will say, have been so far very receptive. One being that would brought up the naming rights to me. And and then subsequent to that, the naming of the courts came. I think I came up with that last week. Because I think there's an opportunity there that, if we had, done it nicely and obviously tastefully, that we could perhaps look at that. Yeah.
Yes, thank you for that explanation. I suppose by extension, I mean, once our builds are done, it would be something that would be a good advertisement for our business community down the road. Certainly not to the numbers that you're looking for today, but a perpetual. The idea is to grow the club, and by extension, use the business community as an integral piece of that funding efforts. And if it's done properly at the beginning, I would assume that the maintenance piece will be less.
Yeah. So as far as construction wise, I believe it's going to be done proper. So we learned a lot, actually. I'm glad you brought that up, Danny. Subsequent to the time we were here last, I went to Hinton because they had their courts redone about 4 or 5 years ago now. But when I went, it was probably 2 or 3 years ago. And quite honestly, they were already falling apart to the point where they're unplayable. Yeah. And we just thought we can't do what they did. And if we have to spend more to get this thing to last a minimum of 10 years, that before we need to really put anything into them aside from netting, maybe some nets or windscreens, but certainly the structure, the substructure should last 10 years. So we're doing it. What I believe it should get us to that point for sure. We're not, I'll say, piecemealing it or patching it. We're actually going to start from scratch. So within these numbers. So yes.
Thank you for that, Councillor Melnick, and then Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Ms. Thomas and Mr. Zavino. Thank you for coming before Council. I just want to refer to your letter and perhaps get a bit of an explanation. The original opportunity where the club came to Council, I think proposed 3 courts, and in your letter you're indicating that you're looking at 6 courts. What is the impact of the additional cost by adding the 3 additional courts? And maybe the question, was that contemplated in the original grant application?
Yeah, good question. So when we did the original grant application, we had budgeted 3 courts. Now, you know, the dream was 6 courts for sure. However, given after this morning's meeting, I don't believe we can reach that lofty goal. So I think we're still looking towards 3 courts. If pickleball is bigger than tennis, maybe down the road we can add some lines within a tennis court to create another pickleball court, or you know, something like that. But I think the goal now is what we had actually applied for back in 2024 or whatever that was.
Mm-hmm.
And if I may, just for the benefit of everyone watching, the original grant was for repaving the existing tennis courts and to convert the skateboard area to pickleball. And that's where the grant came and where we now have funding and capital to be able to facilitate that up to a certain dollar amount.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that's right. So when I first did these quotes, we had different options of which way to go according to the court builders, so to speak. And one of the options was use the existing surface because they felt they could work within, you know, the surfaces that were there. And another part of that was, you know, redoing the whole thing. And where we're looking at today is milling and repaving both surfaces right from scratch. So it's not working with anything that's existing.
Mm-hmm.
Hope that answers your question.
I think that I'm good for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bellick. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland, and thank you, Ms. Thomas and Mr. Zaffino, for bringing this forward. This is much like our skate park. This project is being driven by engaged community members who are passionate about creating opportunities for recreation in our town. And the naming rights, I think I agree with Councillor Bichette. As a hockey parent who's traveled all over Alberta for hockey, I seen countless rec facilities and arenas and fields, community spaces that carry names of donors, families, even local businesses. And I think often those naming opportunities are what allow groups like yours to build. And I appreciate, and I'm sure the taxpayers will as well. You're trying to fund this gap without coming back for more taxpayer dollars. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Consgrud.
Thanks for coming forward today, guys. I could get behind your request, depending on administration, what they have to say in our existing bylaws. One thing maybe I'm thinking, and give you guys a heads up, but naming rights for like a limited time, like perhaps 5 years, I think would benefit everybody. Because I believe the sponsors and the donors just kind of want acknowledgement. And then, 5 years would do that. And then if it works out, depending on what administration has to say, then you can go back and do it again. Thank you.
So that was certainly a consideration. For sure, whether it's a contract for 5 or 7 or 10, whatever that number is, we're open to, again, whatever administration and through council gives us direction to work with. If once we know the parameters that we're dealing with, then we can go out and sell them, so to speak. Yeah.
I would say that we're planning after hopefully many donations. We're hoping to host a barbecue with official presentation and thank yous and that kind of thing. And we have always budgeted for a sponsorship or a donor wall right at the facility so that people will be acknowledged, daily, on a daily basis. When people enjoy the facility, they'll know who supported it. So that's always been in the works.
Councillor Waxer.
I thank you, Mayor Ireland. I just wanted to say that I very much appreciate your optimistic and proactive approach to getting this important work done. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Councillor Roger.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a quick question. Are the nets the same height for pickleball and tennis? I was thinking like for tournaments, if you needed 6 courts and you had lines, so you can just change the nets, I presume, for that, could you?
So what we're proposing, no, they're not. They're not. They're a couple inches different, actually. I think tennis are 36 right across. Pickleball's 36 on the ends, come down to 34. Easily adaptable still. Depending on what level of tournament we want to host, certainly we could work within a tennis net. But also part of the budget includes permanent netting for the pickleball side, which is pretty expensive. And for the record, it's $19,000 for 3 permanent nets. We do have very, very, very good temporary nets. They're fantastic, tournament rated, and they run about between $200 and $2,500. So, and those things are actually, they're very, very heavy gauge steel. However, they're built in such a way that, with a pump of a lever, the net's set in place, and then you pump it again. They go on these wheels. You can wheel them anywhere you want. So for tournaments and that type of thing, those things are fantastic. But even for permanent netting, those work absolutely fantastic. So my proposal, I think, would be going forward with the netting. That's what we use instead of the permanent one.
And also we could actually take the tennis nets off and put if we wanted to do the tournament thing at that competitive level, we could buy more of those, the ones that we're talking about now, just in case. I think it always has been an idea to have, as we did before, like 10 years ago when we repaved, to have the pickleball lines on the tennis courts as well, because we're not talking Wimbledon here, we're just going out for some fun. So that would give an option. If three are booked, then you've got the option of having another couple of 3. So it's a possibility that we could hold a nice tournament for sure, as we did in the past. In the 80s, we organized lots of tennis tournaments on that nice clay court. People came from Hinton, Edson, Belmont, etc. So it would be nice to relive that glory someday.
Just to dovetail on that, Laurie, with respect to tournaments, ATB has already approached us and wanting, once these things are set up, to get involved with organizing of tournaments.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That sounds good. I wonder who decided that the net should be different heights originally. That seems a funny idea.
Councillor Hall and then Councillor Melnick.
I just thought of a question. Thank you, Mayor Ireland. Did the schools use the tennis courts in some kind of program?
Yeah, so we have actually approached GYSD. Is that what it is?
GYPSD.
Thank you. Because, I believe there's a shared usership agreement that with the 2 schools. So we have approached them for, perhaps helping out as well, so that they didn't fly under the radar for sure. We did go after them, so to speak.
Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland, and through you to our presenters. I would like to ask a question about the grant, and particularly if there is a sunset clause. In other words, the grant funding that we received, is there a time when that grant needs to be used? And is that going to require the municipality to initiate working with the club to get in the ground to do this sooner rather than later? My understanding of most grants is that they don't go on forever. You need to use them by a certain point, which might mean that we may be making some decisions regarding capital expenditures before funds are raised to fulfill the desire for the courts.
Well, we did get that grant in January of 2025, and I've got the papers. I can have a look through. It seems to me it was a 2-year situation, but that's a good question, and it's worth pursuing.
Yeah, it's a good question for sure. So in the event, and I did kind of, I won't say anyway, in the event that we don't reach our lofty goal, if you will. What I would then propose is maybe we do the groundwork, maybe doing, getting all the pavement laid, which would be about, I don't know, not quite a third of the 325,000. I would certainly suggest that we at least get that, if in fact we don't get our funds, but I would suggest that maybe we get that portion of it and then maybe apply to the province for an extension for the remainder. And maybe, the situation we're in Jasper might work in our favor if we run into a time crunch.
Yes, the our MLA Martin Long was quite supportive of this whole venture, as you can imagine. Something nice and new in the county. So we will look after that. Thanks very much.
I want to thank you both for coming and appreciate the opportunity to engage with members of the public as always. I just want to be clear about what you leave here with and what does or does not come back. It seems to me that the request is fairly narrow. The request seems to be, what are our parameters for fundraising under the existing policies of the municipality? And although our CAO suggested perhaps referring the request to administration with a report back, if the guidelines are clear, and I think they are, I would perhaps suggest that administration can review your letter and just tell you what the parameters are, and then you can proceed. No need to come back here at all. If the parameters are too narrow, but would require council intervention to broaden them, then of course you're welcome to come back and talk to that. But if it's just a question of finding out where the fences are, I would be happy if council just directed administration to review our existing policies, let you know about naming rights, about the potential for naming individual courts, and allow you to proceed. If you think you need more, you're always welcome back. But I hesitate to ask administration to do the work to come back with a report that is just going to give us factual information that we will say, okay, fine, those are the facts. So if that's what you need, I would be inclined to go that way.
That's exactly what we need. If we could, if once we get the fence, the goalposts where we need to work within, that would be fantastic. Talking to the consultants and project manager this morning, timing is going to, we want to get this off the ground certainly before August. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I mean, if we knew what we were working with, then that would be fantastic. And if we have to come back, to review it or to, ask change or for a change, then we'd be happy to do that. But yeah, that's exactly what we're after.
Or if there is an exercise of discretion on behalf of council within those parameters, obviously you would, there might be a need to come back, but there may be no need to come back to us. I think everyone is favorably inclined. You just need to know how far you can go. Mr. Given,
Yeah, Mayor Ireland. So there is a council policy on naming, municipal assets naming policy from 2018. It's one of our lighter policies under an older style. It explicitly says council may authorize names for municipal assets. And it says the final determination for naming municipal assets, including naming opportunities as a result of donations, gifts, and sponsorships, will rest with mayor and council. So under this policy, everything should come to council. If administration had a chance to take this away, we might come back with a recommendation of the outlines of a program that council could bless the program and the constraints and allow the group to run with it rather than having to come back with each individual name as the policy currently says. So that was when I was thinking of having administration have a look at this and give you some advice. Councillor Consolidated mentioned, well, maybe there should be some limitations to term that a naming, or a sponsorship would cover. We would look at those kinds of things. I don't foresee this being something that would be particularly onerous in terms of being able to return it to council. And I don't see it being something that should stop the group from continuing to talk to potential sponsors, start to build them up into the queue. And if we've got a whole bunch of people that are waiting with their checkbooks open until we've got a program for them to participate in, all the better. So I don't see this as being anything that the club would have to wait for a response on. It sounds like council's inclined. We have the ability to do it. I just would want to make it less burdensome so the club doesn't have to come with each individual name every time somebody else signs up.
Thank you for that. I agree.
Thank you.
Less burdensome and more expeditious. All right. If there are no further questions, I would look to any councillor for a motion. Councillor Waxer.
That council received the correspondence for information and direct administration to bring a report back at a future committee of the whole meeting, as discussed.
All right. Thank you for that motion, Councillor Waxer. Mr. Given, that provides sufficient clarity for administration. All right. Does anyone wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to administration, given the fact that getting in the ground in August would be desirable. This has got a bit of time sensitivity to it, and I'm hoping that capacity and administration that we'll be able to have it maybe at the next committee of the whole meeting to be able to move this forward.
Thank you, Councillor Melnick. Any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? If not, I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. So thank you both again for your presence here today.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you for your time.
All right. Take care.
We are still on agenda item 4, delegations. This is the point on each of our agendas, both for regular council meetings and committee of the whole, where we entertain members of the public who are present in the quorum room to speak to council on or in respect to any matter on the agenda for 3 minutes, subject to questions from council. So I would invite anyone in the gallery, but there don't appear to be any in the gallery who wish to speak to us. So I will say that concludes agenda item 4, delegations, and we can move to agenda item 5, correspondence. And we have one letter from an individual providing transit feedback on the agenda. Are there any comments, observations, questions arising from any member of council with respect to that letter on the agenda? Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. I think one thing that this letter highlights is that residents are paying attention to transit and are thinking about how it can better serve their needs. Maybe as we move closer to the end of this current 3-year transit contract, and ridership continues to grow, there may be an opportunity for broader public engagement and maybe an education campaign. And I feel like that might already be happening. I think it's also an opportunity to better educate residents on how transit decisions are made and where feedback can go. So suggestions and concerns are directed through appropriate channels and can be considered part of future service planning. Transit has become such an important part of Jasper's transportation network. And ensuring residents understand this service and have meaningful opportunities to provide feedback will be very important, an important part of its continued evolution and success.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Any other comments with respect to the letter? Well, I would just like to comment how gratifying it is to receive such an appreciative letter from a member of the public on any subject, but particularly on transit. So I extend my appreciation to the letter writer. If there are no further questions, I would look for a motion to have council receive the letter for information. Councillor Hall?
I'd make that motion, but I also wonder if we need to make a further motion or include in the motion that this feedback be put into the feedback channels, or is that going to happen because we're receiving it? Okay, then I would make the motion that council receive this correspondence for information.
Thank you for that motion, Councillor Hall. Does any councillor wish to speak to the motion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. We also have, as agenda item 5.2, a letter advising council of the approaching annual general meeting of the Jasper Municipal Housing Corporation. Mr. Given, did you wish to speak to that item of correspondence at all?
Sure, Mayor, and just briefly, the corporation is required to have an AGM, annual general meeting, where its shareholders would conduct business of the corporation. Council is the shareholder, and so this formal notice from the corporation to the shareholder is required, and so it's here for council's receipt. So the corporation has met its duty to provide formal notice to the shareholder. I would suggest that this could probably be added to the council calendar of upcoming events, but we just want to make sure that that formal request was documented.
Thank you for that. If there are no questions of Mr. Given with respect to the letter, I would look for a motion to receive the correspondence for information. Deputy Mayor Consgood. Does anyone wish to speak to that motion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. That takes us to agenda item 6.1, the audited consolidated financial statements. Mr. Given, you are going to begin that presentation, and then I understand that we will have a member of the audit team standing by to address us with the auditor's report over the Zoom platform. So I will turn to you, Mr. Given.
Thanks very much, Mayor Ireland, and I'm actually going to quickly turn it over, but just in terms of process about what council can expect today. So the auditor is annually required as a part of our system under the MGA to make a presentation to council about the audited financial statements, and our team is here on screen to be able to do that. First, though, Director Malnichuk is going to cover some of the differences that council would notice between the way audited financial statements are prepared and presented, that's required under their professional practice, and how council and the community will regularly understand some of the issues that we talk about through budget or through the course of municipal operations. So Director Malnichuk will cover those things. Then Jeff and members of his team will make a presentation on the audited financial statements. And then it's a matter of good practice for council to go into a closed session with the auditor without administration, so the auditor can present any other details or findings that they wish to, and so that council can ask the auditor directly, again, without administration, if there are any other causes of concern or issues that the auditor might want to raise to council as the governing body. And then council, after that closed session, would come back to the open session, and you'd be in a position to consider approval and adoption of the audited financial statements as presented. So it's a little bit of a longer process. Director Malnichuk will do a bit of interpretation in advance of the presentation, and then Jeff will give the details, and it's a presentation that auditors regularly give to councils like ours. So feel free to ask any questions that you need to. I'm setting you up, Jeff, that you may get lots of questions, being that this is the first time some of our council members have received audited financial statements. But this council, this is exactly the process that's intended. This is the place to ask questions of our auditors and to ensure that you can feel comfortable with the preparation of the financial statements as they're presented. So from there, Mayor Ireland, I'm going to turn it over to Director Malnichuk to present a little bit of that difference between what you might see in the audited financial statements from the things that we typically talk about at the council table. Director Malnichuk.
Thank you, CEO Given. Good afternoon, Your Worship and Council. Today, administration brings forward a recommendation that Council receive and approve the audited financial statements of the Municipality of Jasper for the year ended December 31st, 2025, as presented. The Municipality Audit Service contract is with Metrics Group. They began in 2019, and they were extended for 1 year after the 5-year contract. A new request for proposals for audit services has been posted to APC with results expected within the coming weeks. Under the Municipal Government Act, municipalities must prepare annual financial statements in accordance with public sector accounting standards and obtain an independent auditor report. Due to the extensive wildfire-related reporting requirements, administration requested an extension for filing. Unfortunately, the extension was not granted. However, additional audit work had to be completed to ensure accurate reporting. The audited financial statements provide a comprehensive picture of the municipality's financial position, its assets, liabilities, revenues, expenses, and cash flows. Council should note that audited financial statements are presented differently than internal financial reports, although the underlying financial information remains consistent. Internal reports are designed for transparency and operational decision-making, while audit statements follow prescribed accounting standards. Administration requested that auditors restate some of the prior year financial state information. For instance, insurance proceeds related to wildfire-destroyed assets were not previously recognized. Adjustments were made to the Wildfire Stabilization Fund calculation to account for parking and utility rate increases, and there was a correction for one property tax account that had to be recorded. And there was also one other recorded local government fiscal framework. It's an unrestricted grant that had not been fully recognized in 2024. As of December 31st, 2025, the municipality is in a net financial debt position of approximately $5.8 million. This position is largely result of extraordinary wildfire recovery costs. Year-end cash balances appear lower, primarily because significant disaster recovery program and provincial stabilization funding was recognized in 2024. Accounts payables decreased significantly as the municipality moved further into the wildfire recovery phase. So there are some key accounting differences that CAO Given mentioned before. For instance, reserve transfers are treated differently in audited statements than in budget reporting and do not impact annual surplus or deficit. Debt borrowing and principal repayments are excluded from the statement of operations. Only the interest costs are expensed. The municipality reported debt limit exceeds $30 million due to the one-time disaster recovery revenues. A normalized debt limit is closer to $24 million. You can see that in the chart that's in the request for decision. I believe that's on page, sorry, I have to look back. Page 19 of the agenda. Audited statements include non-cash expenses such as amortization and accretion totaling approximately $4.7 million, which are not budgeted in administration reports. To comment a little bit on West Yellowhead Regional Waste Management Authority, for 2025, the municipality consolidated its 20% proportionate share of the authority's financial position and operations. Historical waste allocation data contained inaccuracies related to waste hauled on behalf of Parks Canada. A 20% allocation has been applied for consistencies with other member municipalities. Asset retirement obligations. They represent future legal obligations for asset decommissioning and environmental remediation. Major asset retirement obligations for the municipality are the landfill closure and post-closure costs, as well as asbestos remediation in municipal facilities and water well decommissioning. The landfill asset retirement obligation liability totals approximately $4.9 million, while related reserves total only $1.1 million. This creates a potential funding gap of approximately $3.8 million. Further discussions with Waste Management Authority will be required to determine reserve availability and future cost-sharing arrangements. For annual results, the municipality recorded a modest annual surplus of approximately $55,000 in 2025. This represents a significant improvement from the $1.9 million deficit reported in 2024. Despite the annual surplus, the unrestricted accumulated surplus remains in a deficit position, limiting flexibility for future projects. The municipality's financial position is gradually improving, though, following the wildfire. Continued annual surpluses will strengthen the overall fiscal health. Future debenture financing will be reimburse accumulated surplus used to temporarily fund capital projects. So those are the borrowing bylaws that you've seen just recently and that are out in advertising. Provincial stabilization and disaster recovery funding will significantly offset wildfire costs, although the municipality remains responsible for approximately 10% of those eligible expenses. And future recovery will depend on council decisions regarding service levels, project timing, taxation, and user fees. In a closing message, though, overall, the 2025 audited financial statements demonstrate responsible financial management during an unprecedented recovery period. The municipality has made meaningful progress towards restoring long-term financial sustainability while continuing to support wildfire recovery efforts. Thank you. I'm available for any questions, or we can also then just proceed to Jeff and his presentation from Metrics Group. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Director Melanchuk. Just before we turn to the presenter, I'll turn to council. Questions for Director Melanchuk. Councillor Roger.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland, through you to Ms. Melanchuk. On page 19, you talk about the transfers from reserves are recorded as revenues. And we've talked about that before, and I've been asked about that from various business people in town. And to me, it's the opposite of what you're saying, that the audited statements are more transparent because they don't treat them as revenue. And the budget, it's very confusing when you have money coming from reserves treated as revenue. Is there a reason? Are you required to do that under the Act, or why is that done that way?
That might be a better question for the auditors. There's never been anything brought up to us by the auditors about our budgeting practices in reserves and how we treat them. We consider that the reserves recorded as revenue. Sorry, I should comment on the reserves transferred to the expense transferred to reserves. I can't get my words framed properly. Is what we would collect to go into the reserves, and reserves would offset the use. So when they're needed. So basically, the transfers of those reserves, you need to collect them from the taxpayers. So in order to do that, you have to expense them and show how we would get those funds to support the area. And then once those reserves are needed, then they have to support by being brought back into the revenue. I don't know if I'm very clear with my explanation with that, but
I'm not following it really well. But
sorry,
where specifically was asked of me by members of the public was during the transit budgeting, and people were saying that you're showing revenue coming into transit that is just money that's coming from reserves, not even connected to transit. And they're saying, why do they do that? It's confusing. It doesn't make sense. And we're wondering, and I think on your budget, you're going to be separating it out. So real revenue is there, and if money's coming from paid parking or something, it's shown to come from paid parking. But the whole idea of having transfers from reserves as revenue without explaining on the paper where the reserves are from, it's misleading. It gives you a false sense that there's more revenue coming from a particular operation. And I just don't understand the logic of it at all.
Your worship, through to Councillor Roger. If the revenue wasn't recognized as a transfer from reserves to offset the expense, then we would need to tax more for those areas. So if we weren't bringing in a revenue for that from an area that's specifically supporting other areas within the department, within the municipality, that area would have to be taxed more. So that is an area where if you're bringing in a surplus in an area, you can transfer those funds to other areas given direction throughout the budget process or whatnot, or council decision.
Well, why don't you call it a subsidy instead of revenue? If it's not revenue, if it's not coming from for example, the transit, you're subsidizing it by money from somewhere else. So why don't you call it a subsidy instead of revenue?
Mayor Ireland, maybe I'll just jump in to say Councillor Rogers' questions are totally fine and we're happy to discuss them. And none of this is presented that way in the audited financial statements, which is what the topic of discussion is here today. Council may wish to ask the auditor if they're aware of any inconsistencies with how the municipality develops its budget, or if the treatment of these types of internal transfers is consistent with how they're being handled in other municipalities. And when it comes to budget time, Council has approved a direction to administration on the use of paid parking, and so it will be clearly labeled in our budget. So if it's a matter of how we label things, administration can certainly adjust that. If it's a matter of how we describe paid parking, Council's already given direction on that. And all of those things are with respect to the way the municipality does its budget, which is not the same as what the auditors do when they look at our books. But our auditors do audits for many municipalities and see how many municipalities budget. And so you may be able to ask an outside source. Administration's had this conversation before. It hasn't landed well with council. You could ask if somebody else, and our auditors may be able to give you an opinion of whether the treatment of transfers from reserves and recognizing them as revenue is consistent with regular municipal budgeting practice.
Yeah, I think that's the point. The audited financial statements are the proper way to do it in my mind. And the budget is opposite. And I think it is a labeling matter. And if the labeling would be corrected, then I think it'd be fine. But right now, I've got people telling me that, these guys are saying they've got all these revenues and they're not revenues. They're coming from somewhere else. So I think it's a labeling question. And I don't think that would be that hard to change. Anyway, that's all I have to say about that.
Other questions for Director Melanchuk before we leave? Or go ahead, Councillor Waxer, and then Deputy Mayor Conscript.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. Through you to Director Melanchuk. Early in your presentation, you made reference to public sector accounting practices. And I wondered if their public sector accounting practices are different than private sector accounting practices. And that may be a question more for the auditor than for you, but just in case I'd ask now.
Your worship, through to Councillor Waxer, I believe they might be better suited to answer the question on that. They will have more information.
Deputy Mayor Conscript.
You, Mayor Ireland, through you to Director Melanchuk. Pardon my ignorance, and I'm just going to use this for an education session and try to use it to maybe acquire more questions, and hopefully they're clear enough. So as of December 31st, 2025, our debt was just over 5 million, whatever it was you said, but let's say 5 million. And then I guess my first question is, like, what would it be now? Like, if you have that information 6 months later, and what does that number actually mean? Like, that's not the only money we don't have. Like, do we still have our debt limit maxed out? Like, or is that like just all the money that we're owing?
Your worship, through to Councillor Kongsgard. Definitely our debt limit is not maxed out. If you look at, there's this a note on debt limits within the financial statements, and the way that it's stated as the amount of debt limit that is unused at this moment is just over 30 million. The amount of service on debt limit unused is just over 7 million. So currently, the practice that municipality has been applying recently, because of receiving one-time revenues that are a lot larger, we've been removing those just to show the municipality where we might be sitting should we have not gotten that revenue. So we're definitely not close to those areas at the moment. When I normalize things and remove that disaster recovery funding, we come down to 24,500,000 of debt limit unused, and then 5,900,000 for the service on debt limit unused. So that is before taking the debts that we have been speaking about over the past couple of weeks. So then those will affect those debt limits when you see the 2026 financial statements come through.
Great for that. I did do my reading, but never quite caught all that. Thank you.
Director Malinchuk, I believe I have 3 quick questions for you. You mentioned that you had applied for an extension of the May 1st filing requirement, and the extension was not granted. Were you then able to meet that deadline regardless, or we were late with that?
Your worship, unfortunately, we'll be late with that. We can only submit once we present and have motion from council on the financial statements presented from the auditors. It was something that the administration felt that we had to do to ensure that it was properly recorded for the year.
All right, I appreciate that. Thank you. You just referenced the graph that's on page 19, and you were speaking to Deputy Mayor Consolidated about debt limit, and I just want to be clear. So there are 2 numbers there. You mentioned the $30 million of debt limit, but that is based on actual revenue, which is impacted by the additional money we've got because of the wildfire. So the normalized amount is less than that, around 24 million. That shows up on that graph as the amount of debt limit unused, which is clear. That is our existing capacity to take on debt in total. The next line, this is sort of a labeling issue as well, but I wonder whether that line that says service on debt limit, and it's either 8.8 or 7.8, might be reworded to be unused service on debt capacity or something like that, because when it comes across as service on debt, it sounds like it's something that we're paying, but of course it's not. That's the capacity that we still have to service debt, as I understand it. Is that correct?
Unfortunately, this might be a question for the auditors as well. This is the reporting that they use and that I've become accustomed to using as well, and the words that they use behind the debt limits and the service on a debt limit that's remaining.
All right, fair enough. I can ask the auditor in due course. So the last question then relates to the liability that you've identified that flows through our share of the, now I can't remember what kind of costs they are, but the closure costs for the West Yellowhead Waste Management Authority. the fact that there had been some confusion over Jasper's share based on load capacity delivered by Parks Canada, and the fact that there is that $4.9 million liability, 20% of which is ours. Is there anything that we should be advocating to the authority, the West Yellowhead Regional Waste Management Authority, to do about that? Or are there any practical impacts on Jasper as a result of this? Is it just something noted in the books, or should we take some action and try and encourage the authority to increase its reserves to be able to better fund that contingent liability?
Mayor Ireland, maybe I'll speak to that one. So this is a common thing that you'll see in municipalities' audited financial statements, is a recognition of post-closure costs or closure costs for landfills. So it is consistent with how you'd see this in other municipalities, and all of the partners would see a similar thing reflected in their audited financial statements. At the board table, council members that are representing the municipality may wish to understand better how the organization intends to fund its post-closure costs. And I will say that there is probably some level of practicality that the organization would have to deal with. On the municipal side, we see this with respect to tangible capital assets and depreciation. There's a number in our audited financial statements that I'm sure Jeff will speak to that shows how much the municipality should be setting aside for when we have to demolish the activity center. Council can appreciate that's probably quite some time away, but there is a financial number to that, and that sort of concept of there's a cost to this to somebody in the future. It probably wouldn't make complete sense for us now, today, to start saving up 100% of the cost of demolishing that facility when we know that it's many, many years away. Different councils make different. So you can appreciate that there's some practical things that an organization should do to ensure that it's prepared for future decisions that will come. And landfill costs are like that. Council members that are representing us at the board table should be inquiring with management there about how confident they are that they're setting us enough aside for those eventual costs. And, what's the lifespan of the facility and those types of governance questions that you could be asking at the board table.
Thank you for that. Are there any further questions for Director Malinchuk? And if not, I would invite either Mr. Alliston to come on directly, or if he's there, I can't see.
Hello. Do you guys hear me okay?
We can indeed. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. I have a presentation here, so I'll share this, and then hopefully everybody can see this okay. Yeah. Awesome. I believe this works. So thanks for having me here today to discuss the Municipality of Jasper's 2025 audit findings and financial statements, effectively closing date here for June 16th. So begin these presentations, I usually like to do a bit of an overview of an audit, so why we have an audit and the importance of it, and really it is to enhance the degree of confidence of those intended users of these financial statements, so the users being yourselves as councillors, ratepayers, municipal affairs, the province of Alberta, so those organizations or individuals with a vested interest in the financial performance of the municipality. As auditors, we're assessing if the financial statements are presented fairly in all material respects in accordance with Canadian public sector accounting standards. So those are the accounting standards that all government organizations report under. As independent auditors, separate from management, so we design procedures to provide reasonable assurance. So it's a high level of confidence, but it's not an absolute guarantee. And then based on the outcome of the work we performed, we then give our opinion on the financial statements. When it comes to responsibilities, when it comes to the financial statements here, just to note that management does design the processes that ensure transactions are recorded accurately and that year-end numbers reflect the municipality's true position. Those charged with governance, just to note here that you do have the ultimate responsibility for the financial statements, as that does rest with council. And then for us as auditors, our objective, which is to obtain reasonable assurance that the financial statements are free from material misstatement. We also exercise professional judgment, maintain professional skepticism throughout, and then again, issue our audit report and give our opinion on the financial statements. When it comes to audit results, so today, in order to finalize our audit, we will complete our standard completion procedures. We'll also perform subsequent event procedures up to today's date. We'll obtain approval of financial statements from council, and then we'll also complete our communication, which is what we're doing right now. When it comes to your accounting policies and estimates, we did note that we had one PSAS standard in relation to revenue recognition that hasn't been adopted yet within the financial statements of the municipality, as well as a couple items in the estimation side when it comes to stabilization, amortization in relation to our audit findings report. When it comes to procedures results, we did have some notes, some deficiencies in internal controls within our audited financials, our audit findings report. And then at the end, we're given our opinion, which is an unmodified opinion, so a clean opinion on the financial statements that they do present fairly in all material respects in accordance with Canadian public sector accounting standards. When it comes to significant audit risk, these are areas of focus for us within our work, areas of concern based on either fraud risk or specific risk. We perform testing in these areas. So we do have some findings this year in various categories where we do have some unrecorded misstatements of note, some estimates with recommendations from ourselves, as well as internal controls that we had noted. So those are detailed within our audit findings report. When it comes to the financial results of the municipality for the year, and of course with Canadian public sector accounting standards, this is a snapshot of where the municipality was as at December 31, 2025. So as previously mentioned, you were in a net debt position of about 5.8 million versus 6.7 year over year. You did see substantial decrease in your financial assets and liabilities, really in relation to disaster recovery funding that was spent in the 2024 year. But you are decreasing your net debt in relation to the repayment of your long-term debt year over year. As you see, it went from 23.5 million down to 22.6. So as your debt load does get repaid, you should see that net debt position kind of move down. Now, and speaking with other municipalities, when it comes to smaller urban municipalities, there usually is more of a debt load or a net debt position, as usually debt is taken on for projects within the community and then kind of paid down until you're in a better financial position to then, kind of do the same thing again. So although you are in a net debt position, this does mean that you currently don't have sufficient financial assets to meet all your obligations. But a large portion of that change is relation to long-term debt, which is paid out over more than just 1 year. When it comes to your financial assets, you'll see that's made up of accounts receivable as well as your cash position. So your cash position makes up about 41% or 17 million of your total assets, with the rest in relation to trade and tax AR. When it comes to your cash for the year, so you started the year at 39.5 million. You'll note you have an annual surplus in accordance with Canadian public sector accounting standards, about 10.1 million. You also had a non-cash adjustment for about 4.7, which is your amortization. So that causes your cash kind of ladder here to increase. You then had a change in your non-working capital, which was mainly in relation to taking your cash to pay off accounts payable in the prior year. That lowered your cash position down to 32 million. You then spent 14 million on new tangible capital assets. and then as well as repaid some debt for about $922,000, which then caused your cash position to end the year at about $17.1 million. So that's where you're seeing the changes from your cash position from year over year. When it comes to taxes and grants in place of taxes, you'll note that your current taxes and grants about $384,000, arrears about $500,000, so about $900 in total. A large portion of this is made up of one resident or one group within the municipality there, and then your allowance for doubtful accounts or deemed uncollectible about $48,000 for a net receivable portion of $850,000. When it comes to trade and other receivables. So receivables from other governments, such as MSI and LGFF funding or Jasper Municipal Housing Corporation. You also have trade and other receivables from Parks Canada and utilities to be collected. You have what's called a debt recoverable or local improvements. This is a local improvement tax that was issued within a specific area within the municipality, the Connaught utilities. So as you collect tax payments on that, a portion goes towards reducing this receivable balance year over year. GST in relation to fourth quarter payments, so left you about $23.5 million to be collected subsequent to year end. When it comes to the liabilities of the municipality, so various items here, such as your long-term debt of $22 million, accounts payable of $6.6 million, so various trade payables to vendors, as well as wages accrual at year end. And then as well as deferred revenue in relation to grants that the municipality has collected to be spent in future periods. Another item to note on here is your asset retirement obligation, so $1.2 million. So the bulk of that in relation to your percentage ownership of the Waste Management Commission. So this asset retirement obligation is to date the cost it would cost the municipality or their portion in order to cover or clear the liability there in relation to the waste management facility there. This number will increase over time, and as well as when new information becomes available, there'll be adjustments to it. But what you're trying to do is you're trying to ensure that you have a cash position available to meet this liability. So this liability exists. There's obviously estimates involved in trying to determine what that cost will be in the future and what you're trying to work towards. But again, as you move towards the expected date that the asset is to no longer be used, you want to make sure you have the cash available in order to meet the obligation. Currently looking at the financial statements of that authority, there is sufficient financial assets to meet this obligation in excess of that. So at this time, based on the information there, again, I think there, based on the statements, it does look like there is sufficient resources there. When it comes to deferred revenue within the municipality, so these are your current operating and capital grant programs, the main ones here. You'll note the 2024 number, about $8.5 million. You had received about $17.8 million in new grant funding. So in relation to the DRP programs, Housing Accelerator Fund, as well as stabilization, regional transit services, some of the larger ones there. And then in turn, you recognize revenue. So about $9 million went into operations in relation to stabilization income and disaster recovery program. And then as well as about $1.8 million of the grant funding used for tangible capital asset purchase, such as your aerial replacement, various equipment purchases, as well as your parking lot and office flooring. So at year end, about $15.5 million still to be used in subsequent years. When it comes to the debt limits of the municipality, so your total debt limit is calculated at 1.5 times total operating revenue. So based on the MGA, so about $53 million. Your current debt load at 22.6 leaves you with an unused portion of about $30 million that the municipality could still use to be in requirements with the MGA. When it comes to your service on your debt limit, so you're allowed to pay for principal and interest on the upcoming year at about 0.25 times your total operating revenue, so about $8.8 million. Your expected service on the debt limit next year is $1.9 million. So you still have about $6.9 million of current service limit that you could obtain. So depending on what the interest rates were on that debt, that will impact your service limit based on what you would take on for new debt there. But again, the municipality is well within its limits there. When it comes to the normalized debt limits, so this is taken with the reduction of the DRP funding. So again, so your normalized debt limit would be about 46 million, leaves you about 24 million left, and then your unused debt servicing limit about 5.9 if you were to remove those revenues from your current operating amount. When it comes to non-financial assets or tangible capital assets of municipality, you'll see you spent $14 million on new additions in the year. Interim housing site services being the main one there. So work on the skate park, aerial replacement, as well as moved items into active use. So transfer out of construction in progress into buildings mainly in relation to your activity center, arena, and then transit facility as well. When it comes to amortization expense for municipality, you'll note that number is about 4.7 million on here. That represents the usage of your asset. So every asset has an expected useful life, whether it's 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 40 years. You take a percentage of those, it goes into your amortization and then flows into your operations, again, representing the usage of the assets. So you'll see here, you started the year at 96 million, you added 14 million, used 5, so you're seeing an increase in your net book value. What that should be telling you is that you're replacing assets, you're adding new assets to the municipality. Where you may see a cause for concern is if you have a large net book value, you see that amount decreasing as the years go on. That would entail that your assets are not being replaced and that they're actually aging out. So in this case, you are seeing activity, you're seeing a replacement there and an increase in your overall tangible capital assets. When it comes to the municipality's accumulated surplus, so at the end of the year, you did your unrestricted surplus is in a deficit here, about 3.2 million, so about a $3.6 million change year over year there. Your restricted surplus, you had allocated additional funds into there, so you had increased that by about 500,000. And then as well as your capital reserves, that increased by 3.2 million. So the net change from your unrestricted and restricted surpluses is about 110,000. That kind of represents the cash change in what you're seeing of your accumulated surplus, and then your equity and tangible capital assets increase at about 10 million. And that's really indicative of where you're going to see your annual surplus. So in accordance with Canadian public sector accounting, your annual surplus will be about 10.1 million. 100,000 of that is in relation to the changes in your unrestricted surplus and restricted, and the majority of it, the 10 million, is in relation to increasing your overall tangible capital asset position. When it comes to the statement of operations, so the total revenues for the year of 35.3 million versus 60 in the prior year. You're seeing your government transfers for operating, so those are down. Prior year, you had 24 million recognized as revenue in disaster recovery program. So that's the change year over year there. User fees and sales of goods are up, so you are seeing additional revenue in your parking, sewage, waste, and recreation facilities now that they're fully operational and kind of being used more there within the community. Net municipal property taxes of 9 million. Now, when it comes to other revenues, down to 3.5 from 4.2, just kind of reduced income there when it comes to Parks Canada. And then your rentals. So now with your arena rentals, you're seeing that up to 600,000 versus 380 in the prior year. So all in all, increase in revenue about decrease about 24.6 million, which is really in line with your disaster recovery program funding. So about 41% change. And then in relation to budget, about a $4 million increase from what was expected there. This chart kind of shows you where your budget was at in relation to the line and where your actuals are in relation to the bar graph. So you'll see that when it comes to revenue streams, everything was either at or above the line, except in relation to the net municipal property taxes there, which was covered through the stabilization program. When it comes to expenses by function or department, so here you'll see a decrease as well, down to 35 million from 61 million. Again, in the protective services side, you're looking at the disaster recovery program changes year over year there. Parks and recreation, you're seeing a large bump here, really in relation to the new assets that were moved into use in relation to the arena. So you're in the arts, so you're seeing the amortization increase as those assets begin to be amortized over the expected useful life there. When it comes to the public health, your community relief funding, that was up to 5.7 from 4.7 in that function. And as well as your economic development, you saw an increase in that function from 1.7 to 700,000, really in relation to more hiring in that area. So year over year, down to 35 million from 61, or about a $25 million change. And then when it comes to the change from budget to actual here, about 5.5 million more. A large portion of that is in relation to amortization expense when you see the changes there. So this chart here represents where the budget was at in relation to actual. So most categories are slightly over when you look at utilities to general government, a lot of that pertaining to the amortization expense. When it comes to expenses by object, so what the money was spent on, so increase in wages, so full-time equivalencies there, more hires in the air. Contract and general services is where you're seeing the disaster recovery program change year over year. Materials, goods, and utilities, decrease in hotel expenses is where you're seeing the changes in that category year over year. And then with the amortization expense, the increase in the arena and other assets being amortized. After looking at revenues and expenses, your next item on your operations schedule is your other income. So these items more or less pertain to capital items. So government transfer capital represents money from Parks Canada, disaster recovery program, other grant programs in relation to capital additions, so about 10 million there, and then as well as a small loss on disposal of tangible capital assets. So in summary, total revenues of 35.3 million, expenses of 35.3, and then your other income, again, pertaining to your capital asset change, leaves you with a surplus of 10.1 million in the year. As I spoke on earlier, about 10 million of that is reflected in your change in equity and tangible capital assets, and 100,000 in your restricted and unrestricted reserves. In summary, we're issuing an unmodified opinion or a clean opinion on the financial statements. We do note in our audit findings report some areas where it came to the timing of the audit, obviously, being into June, with some control deficiencies or recommendations in that area. We talked about PSAS standards unadopted. That's in relation to 3,400 when it comes to revenue recognition. Other items in relation to estimates. When it comes to your net debt position, again, down to 5.7 from 6.7, and an annual surplus of the year of 10.1 million versus 8.8 in the prior year. Guess if anybody has any questions on the financial statements, I could definitely address those here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Olson, for presenting that thorough report. Much appreciated. I will look to councillors for questions, and reminding councillors that we will have an in-camera session to follow regarding advice from officials that we will conduct without administration in the room. So save those questions for that time, but for this public part of the meeting, I welcome any questions. Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to our audit team. I'm going to reference the audit finding page 16, our agenda page 38. And under net book value, there's an abbreviation, CIP, and there's some significant numbers there in transfers. What is the definition, or what is CIP for the benefit of all of us?
Yeah, so CIP references construction in progress. So these are assets that extend beyond the year end. So projects that you're still working on. So whether it was your transit facility in prior year or the arena work. So again, those stay in construction in progress. And then when they become active in use, they then get transferred to the respected categories such as engineered structures or buildings. Also your activity center. So those are the main ones that were in there.
And just for clarification of construction in progress, we currently have the Jasper Municipal Housing Corporation, and there is in 2026 we have construction in progress that asset is not reflected under tangible capital assets under the municipality, but reflected under the Municipal Housing Corporation. Am I correct?
Correct. That's under the Housing Corporation. Yeah.
If I may, I'll just continue on page 39 and just page 17 of your report regarding our accumulated surpluses.
Yep.
And there we have a number of surpluses that have increased, utilities having increased by $1 million, and also the reserves for the West Yellowhead Regional Waste Management by $800,000. These are normal accumulations or transfers into our surpluses for future use. The extra $3 million that are in there, would that be typical year over year?
So usually when you're seeing the transfers from the reserves, it's usually coming either at budget time. So what you're budgeting for, whether you're planning on taking excess revenues from prior years and flowing them in from reserves to be used in the year, or if you're planning to transfer money into the reserves in order for future use. They also pertain to potential projects that didn't happen within the 2025 fiscal year that you're moving into 2026, and therefore adjusting the funding into there to be spent in the upcoming fiscal year. But I do think that's kind of the year over year changes, but it's definitely good to have a good understanding or what the expectation is when it comes to these reserves and what the uses are going forward, as they are a way to save money for the future there for future projects is kind of so.
Thank you for that.
Yep.
Councillor Waxer.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland, and through you to the audit team. I've over the years been asked a couple of questions around the audit process, and I wondered if you could speak to the difference between public sector accounting standards versus private sector accounting standards.
Yeah, so public sector accounting standards are really designed to reflect the position of a government organization. What really your mandate or what you're trying to do is provide services within your community, whereas a private enterprise financial statement is really driving profits and for that entity. So a good difference is you have what's called accumulated surplus. Within a private enterprise statement, you have what's called shareholders' equity. So you're trying to build shareholders' equity in relation to, again, profits within a corporation, whereas the municipality is really trying to enhance services within the community and provide those. So it's really a difference in what you're trying to achieve within the financial statements difference there. When it comes to auditing, though, however, both are audited in accordance with Canadian auditing standards or generally accepted auditing standards. So those are the same whether you're a private company or a government organization. So, for example, such as materiality, understanding the risks within the entity, reviewing of internal controls. Those are all items that are done on if you're a private or a public company entity. You just have different areas, again, of risk within there. So I don't know, hopefully that kind of helps with the explanation there. But again, the difference in the two frameworks when it comes to presenting the financial statements is definitely more driven by expectation of shareholder equity versus accumulated surplus there.
Councillor Roger.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland, through you to our auditor. First question is, generally, for a town our size, is a debt of $22 million something you find typical throughout the province, or is it high, or is it low? Can you advise us to that?
I wouldn't say it's out of the norm. Definitely, I do find more of a debt load taken on when it comes to a town within the province in relation to the same sort of items that you're spending on when it comes to either recreation facilities, stuff like that within your community. Yeah, and then I mean you're taking on really a long-term debt portion and then paying that off. Now, if your net debt position were say to exceed, say what even your long-term debt is, there could be some financial concerns there because and potentially in getting back to a net financial asset position. But as long as you're able to manage your cash flow position, understand your debt limits and how you plan on repaying that debt and having sufficient revenues generated within a year that you're collecting to make those payments, you should be good. But yeah, it's pretty common. Like I see it in a lot of other municipalities. Like I audit, Spruce Grove in our area or Town of Cochrane. Like so, there's other communities. Yeah, it's just more. It's definitely something that I note or see more common within the urban municipalities versus the rural counties.
Thank you. The second question I had is I'm not an accountant, obviously, but I don't understand why deferred revenue is a liability. It seems like if it's revenue, we're getting it sometime, we don't owe it. So can you explain that for me?
Yeah. So the reason you see items sitting in deferred revenue is because they actually have an obligation assigned to them. So for example, when you obtain your allocation of your local government fiscal framework funding, you have to submit projects into there that need to be approved in order for that funding to then be recognized and associated with that. So all those items that are in there have an obligation assigned to them. So they need to be spent either on a specific project within your community, a new tangible capital asset used for road repairs, whatever you had applied for. Those are why the obligations are there. So once that is met, then the revenue comes in. Some of them are timing. Some of them you may get, some FCSS funding ahead of time that may be for the upcoming quarter. So those will get deferred until that quarter actually takes place. But more in line, those items are there because there's an obligation associated with them. And if you didn't meet the obligation, you have to repay it.
Until I see some other hands, I have some questions for you, Mr.
That's
Alston. Generally speaking, I appreciate that there are, of course, significant challenges arising from the fact that we suffered a major catastrophe by fire, and there's been all sorts of changes in the flow of money into and out of the municipality. And you have noted, I think, in your report that there have been some challenges. Can you speak generally? Have you done an audit for any other community that faced similar circumstances? And can you provide any comments about whether this is within the expected norm or something different? That is I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so we audited up in Slave Lake area within the municipal district there with their fire. It's definitely, I think, the communication between the province and the municipalities has gotten better. Back then, there was about 25 different grant programs coming in, a lot of different specific things. Now it's kind of more streamlined into one. However, then I think that they were at 100% versus 90-10 versus a change in the DRP there. But definitely it does take time. There is a lot more, especially with the funding coming in, and would this project be approved? Would that be approved? Does it meet this? Does it meet that within these agreements, and just more volume of costs? So yeah, definitely a lot there. So obviously I think the municipality is moving towards more stability, getting back to where things used to be. But yeah, it does definitely take years. And I mean, I know we're kind of issuing the statements here maybe a couple months late. I've had ones where we're a year late, or we're in September, right? So although it's June, it's definitely still reasonable time, and definitely working towards getting back probably to where you want to be. So.
Thank you. I appreciate that answer. It may not be known to you, but there has been discussion around this table about the difference between the way an auditor presents financial information and the way it's presented to council during the budget process. And I take it that you see the budget documents from numerous municipalities. Are you able to comment about whether or not the way our own administration prepares and reflects budgetary issues matches what you see in other communities?
Yeah, like I don't think this was the best way. So there's definitely the differences between the way they're presented, of course, with Canadian public sector accounting standards, and then obviously the way the budget is being presented to council. Now yours is more, I would say, yours is more on a cash basis. So you expect $2 in and you expect $2 out, whereas really ours is on a accrual basis, where we're definitely having different accounting policies and revenue recognition and whatnot within these financial statements. Now, with that said, yes, I do see a lot more municipalities, having a reserve line item coming into as revenue, which means you're pulling from a reserve that has accumulated surpluses over subsequent years that you're then going to recognize into revenue and use that in order to fund expenses within that area, as you're kind of pulling from an area that you have specifically put money aside, for example. Or you're going to transfer money into an area because you didn't, you say you received the money and then you transferred it as an expense into a reserve because you didn't actually incur the cost that you had expected to get within that area, and then use it into next year then by transferring out of the reserves into revenue for next year. So that is pretty common practice within the municipal framework. But yes, you would not see reserve transfers as revenue or expense items within these financial statements. Those transfers are all netted on that accumulated surplus slide within accumulated surplus, as those aren't actual revenues or expenses within the period. So those definitely are differences between the two frameworks. One item that's always been a bit of an issue is amortization. So whether you budget for that or you don't, my personal preference would be that you would see some budgeting for amortization. And the reason I say that is that you do have assets that are aging and you do need to have money to replace assets in the future. I'm sure if you ask the city of Calgary how all their water lines are and how much those are costing to repair, that's a kind of asset that you would think maybe will last forever or just need some maintenance. But you never know how long these roads, water lines, sewer lines are all going to last in your community. And it is prudent to probably have some more money put aside for stuff like that. What those numbers are or what that would entail, I don't know. But, the expectation of maybe having grant funding forever is not also in the cards. So only time will tell and things, but those are kind of my kind of thoughts on that. Another budgeting difference you'll see too is if you were to take on a debenture and you had $10 million of debt coming in, you would see a revenue line item more likely in your budget because you're going to spend that 10 million on costs in the year. You're then going to have an expense line item to spend the 10 million on costs, where you wouldn't see that on your audited financial statements. You would just see your debt obligation increase and your tangible capital asset increases. So that's another discrepancy as well. But hopefully that kind of helps.
Hopefully it does, yes. And I thank you for that. As I understood your response, then you as an auditor are working on an accrual basis, whereas our municipality and other municipalities work on a cash basis. Is that the essence of the difference in the style of reporting?
For me, yeah, that's how I view it more. It's kind of what you are expecting to spend within that 12-month period on revenues and expenses versus more, whereas this is on a more of an accrual basis. Yeah.
Great. And so if a particular activity is being funded from reserves, it would not be unusual in any community to see that come in as revenue on the budget documents.
No, it would be pretty common because the reserve is again previous surpluses that you have moved into there, and then now you're allocating to spend them. Now, how you want to present them. So say maybe you want to present your actual revenues, actual expenses, then you want to have, a net deficit line item. And then below that, you have reserve transfer to show the funding being, coming from somewhere else in order to make it zero. That might be a better presentation, but either way, how you do it, it's still the same impact on the bottom line.
All right, thank you for that. I still don't see other hands, so I'll continue with a couple more questions. On page 20 of your report, which is page 42 of our electronic agenda, expenses by function. So you break out function differently than we do. This does not reflect where we see our money spent, but that's all right. I understand the reasons for that. My question really is, and again, you see lots of municipalities, and so I did some rough calculations of the expense amounts in those various functions as percentages of the whole. Do you see that breakdown as more or less typical in other communities? And I'm particularly interested, for example, in economic development, which we don't have as a recognized function, but obviously from your perspective, we are expending money for what you would consider to be items of economic development. And just proportionately, I wonder how that compares to what you see in other communities.
I don't have those numbers in relation to the percentage. Plus, if you look at within your financial statements, note 21 is segmented information. So within each of these categories on here, there's a breakdown of what items are included in there. So that would help you as a counselor identify which maybe groupings or internally what you're looking at more as to what category those would go into. So with that said, I don't know if I would be able to compare. I'd have to look at what other municipalities would maybe have in relation to those areas and costs associated with that versus revenue. I don't actually have those numbers with me, but again, it's really up to the it's really up to council in what they want to be spending in relation to these areas when it comes within your community. So it could differ community to community based on what their initiatives are, but I don't see that as being definitely a cost that's kind of out of the norm. And looking at other municipalities, I would expect your utilities, your recreation costs to be, some of the larger ones, which you have here. But I don't, that would kind of be my thoughts on that. But I don't really have a specific answer for the economic development one.
All right, thank you for that. Last question, at least for me. If you could just take a look at page 14 of your report, and for councillors, that's page 36 of our agenda. That deals with debt limit, and I just want to have a clear understanding whether you're using terminology that you're required to use or whether it could be adapted a bit. So there is a line, service on debt limit.
Yeah.
And it shows as $8.8 million.
Yeah.
But it seems to me that it's easy to interpret that as an actual expenditure, whereas my understanding is that what is really captured there is service capacity on our unused debt limit. So we could be spending up to another $8.8 million on debt if we maxed out our debt limit. Am I reading that wrong?
Yeah, so the service on debt limit is the total amount of principal and interest that you are allowed to pay in the subsequent year. So when we look at how much revenue you have for the year, if you take 0.25 times that total operating revenue, this is the number that you get. And that means that you are allowed, based on how much revenue you have, you would be allowed to make 8.8 million of debt repayment subsequent to the year end. So this would factor, if you had higher interest rates, definitely your service on debt limit, you would creep up on that higher. As well as if you took on more debt. But that's kind of what that means. That's telling you that's how much debt, principal and interest, you can pay back next year.
Right. So that is our capacity for increased principal and interest payments on debt that we have not taken out.
Correct. Yeah. And then next year you're expected to spend 1.9 million based on your all your debt term sheets. So you still have 6.9 million of additional service room that you could take on when you take on new debt.
Thank you for that. I will look again to my council colleagues for any additional questions. And if there are none, I would entertain a motion to receive the 2025 audit report as information and then move into camera on motion to move into closed session where we can ask Mr. Alliston questions with respect to the confidential parts of his report. And then we will come back into open session. So in the absence of other questions in the public realm, I would look for a motion. Councillor Waxer? I take it then.
Would you like me to read them?
To receive the 2025
Okay,
audit
I'll do them.
Okay.
Sorry, since you had just read them, I wasn't sure if you wanted me to do them again. That council received the 2025 audit report presented on June 16th, 2026 as information, and that council moved to a closed session pursuant to Section 29, Advice from Officials of the Access to Information Act.
Thank you for that combined motion, Councillor Waxer. Does anyone wish to speak to the motion? All right, I will call a question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. So the report has been received as information. We are moving into closed session. So I understand, Mr. Alliston, that there is a separate link for you and council will adjourn to another room. And so those members or those non-members of council who are present in the quorum room can stay here. I will just let you know, Mr. Alliston, that we'll probably be a couple of minutes. We haven't had a break yet, so people may want to take a detour before they move to the other room, but we will join you as quickly as possible for our in-camera session. And to those watching on our Zoom channel, I cannot tell you precisely how long we will be, but we will come back on the existing Zoom link as soon as we are done our in-camera session. Welcome all. We are back in open session, having concluded our in-camera session with Mr. Alliston on behalf of the auditors. And as a result of that session, I think it is fair to say that Mr. Alliston provided us a level of comfort that there are no burning issues with respect to the management of our finances at the municipality. There are no issues with which we should be unduly concerned. There are always lots of little things and improvements that can be made, and we went through a list of those. But overall, there are no material misstatements in any of the information that has been provided to the auditors. And so he has confirmed that they have provided us with an unmodified opinion. Subject to any further questions that any councillor might want to put on the public record, I would invite a councillor to make a motion that council receive and approve the audited financial statements for the municipality of Jasper as presented for the year ended December 31st, 2025. Councillor Frechette, thank you for that. Does anybody wish to speak to the motion? Right, I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. And Mr. Holliston, you are still with us. So again, we thank you for all your time and effort in the preparation of the statements and your time today explaining them to us. And I take this opportunity to thank our staff as well for all the work that they have done to help you get to this point.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks for having us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Enjoy the mission. Thanks.
That takes us to agenda item 6.2, Director's Report from the Director of Operations and Utilities, Director Donaldson.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Mayor, Council. I'll start first with major projects. So we have the water meter replacement project that is moving into its first phase with installation scheduled to begin at the end of July 2026 with communications to follow. In terms of requests for proposals, we've issued those for both asphalt and concrete. They closed last week, and actually since the printing of this or the publication of the report, we have awarded to Border Paving for asphalt and paving and to Raiders Site Services for concrete as of this morning. The request for information for e-bikes and charging stations remains open and will close on June 24th. We received 127 clarifying questions from interested proponents on Alberta Purchasing Connection there. And we did post the responses on June 15th there. So a lot of interested parties, it looks like. Next week, we'll be bringing forward a program updates for the streetscape standards and study there at Committee of the Whole. In terms of staffing, within our Operations Services branch there, all 6 seasonal grounds positions and 1 permanent full-time roads positions have been successfully filled. And we appear to be ahead of schedule so far this year compared to 2025. In maintenance, fleet, and assets, recruitment challenges continue for our fleet technician position. This role has remained vacant for more or less 2 years and has been reposted 3 times since August of 2025 and 4 times total. The current posting was to close on June 14th. We've extended it to the 21st, and we have broadened that out to various different job boards as well. The Utilities Department will be posting a term utility manager position in the coming weeks, and the project management team has successfully filled the project manager position. So those two are interrelated, if you're wondering. So our project management position was awarded. That individual has been seconded back to the Recovery Coordination Center, and then in the secondment phase there, our utility manager has agreed to step in for a period of just over a year to fill that project management position. So we're in good hands. In terms of service trends, our department work orders, so for those of you unfamiliar with what those are, they're our formal system to track, log, and mark completed tasks across the work that we do. So between March 1st and May 31st of this year, the department achieved an overall work order completion rate of 87%. In transit, work on the transit business plan continues. And again, we will be here next week on the 23rd with a draft request for decision for the business plan development. Also a reminder that the summer transit schedule is now in effect. It went into effect last month. Interesting note about ridership. Transit ridership continues to show very strong growth. Local fixed route boardings were up 49% compared to May 2025. and year-to-date ridership is up 56% over the same period last year. Now, specifically regarding our spring planting activities that are underway, we are about a week and a half to 2 weeks ahead of planned schedule. So I don't know about you, but I love seeing that throughout the town, all the flowers and plants going in. It's a great time of year. And staff, particularly our roads team, continue to support home delivery routes as required, in addition to the bylaw team there. One more interesting thing that you'll likely see around the next couple of weeks is we've rented a Melastic machine. And so what that is it's used to melt down flexible, stone-filled, rubberized asphalt mixture. And it fills wider cracks, distressed pavement, somewhere where ruts, things like that, but just somewhere where a standard pothole patch would fail. So we're going to be giving that a go for about a 2-week period. Into maintenance, fleet, and assets. So asset management software has entered the testing phase. So after months of review and demos, the selection team moved forward with the purchase of PSD citywide software, which is used by different municipalities across North America. The company is headquartered in Canada, in London, Ontario. And I'm also happy to report that air conditioning in repairs that were in the multipurpose hall have been completed. And our utilities teams, I did want to focus a bit more specifically on their work orders. So that particular team, they had 269 out of 280 work orders completed between April 1st and May 31st. So that's a 96% success rate there. Staff have been completing biannual entries and inspections at all 3 lift stations. Our annual valve actuating program has been completed. You'll see that 393 out of 487 valves were actuated this cycle. Many valves were unable to either be located or they were blocked by parked vehicles. So that's why you see the discrepancy in the numbers there. But they were able to complete as many as they could. And our spring hydrant inspections have also been completed. Now, when it comes to communication and engagement, Stewardship Day is taking place on June 24th. The Communities in Bloom Committee is anticipating participation for more than 100 participants, not including any Parks Canada staff. Our annual transit survey is being planned for release later this summer. Our transit team continues to engage with local businesses, local community members on ongoing initiatives and service improvements. And lastly, of note, just something I wanted to make council aware of is that the 2026 American Waterworks Association State of the Water Industry Report was recently released. It's a very good read. The report identifies key sector-wide challenges, including aging infrastructure, capital funding pressures, system resilience, and workforce capacity. These closely align with many of the challenges that we're currently facing in the community, especially considering post-wildfire recovery, aging utility infrastructure, and different priorities. So with that said, I'm available for any questions that you may have at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Donaldson. Questions from councillors? Councillor Roger.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland, through you to Ms. Donaldson. I was just wondering, since the fleet technician has been not filled for 2 years, I take it we're hiring somebody else by the hour or something, and how does that work out for costs? Is it quite a bit more than what it would cost to hire somebody, or less?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship, through you to Councillor Roger. Yeah, we are essentially having to outsource that labor. So whether it's a technician coming to us or us having to send vehicles out, typically to Edmonton, sometimes to Hinton, depending on availability, it definitely increases our contracted service costs. In terms of direct comparables, I think more or less we're spending slightly more on contracted services, but really when we start to look at things like preventative maintenance and things that we could do in-house overall, our costs are much higher than they could be if we had an individual in-house.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Frechette.
Thank you, Mayor Island, and through you to Director Donaldson. A couple of questions and a comment. I was approached by a family from out of town just the other day, and they were commenting on how beautiful our trees are looking in Jasper, on both the median downtown and Patricia Street. and the robust flowers we're seeing on our lilac bushes and whatnot. And I have to agree. I don't think that the downtown core, in terms of vegetation, has been this vibrant in a long, long time. So my congratulations to you and to your team. And I know we do have the Stewardship Day event coming up here on the 24th, and that whole exercise is going to be augmented even more. So I'm very grateful to you and your team, and it puts us in a great position for our Community in Bloom competition in the fall. So I'm looking forward to that as a member of that committee, and it's going to be quite terrific. I'm sure of it. I just have a couple of questions. We didn't get an update on the water treatment repair rotating arm. I'm not really sure what the actual name of that component is. I wonder if you would have any update on where that's at, please.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to Councillor Frechette. Thank you for that. Yeah, absolutely. So we are still awaiting for the parts to arrive. If you recall, it had about 20 to 24-week lead time, but we don't have any delays that we are anticipating at this time. So we are still technically on schedule.
Okay, so the big influx in use is going to be, it won't be an issue. We'll be able to get that back on stream before the summer hits in full storm.
Yeah, we are definitely hoping to have that on board as soon as possible. We're looking at early July for repairs to be underway.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Ms. Donaldson.
Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to Councillor, Director Donaldson. A quick compliment on the completion rates on the work orders. That's great. It means that things are, I interpret that to mean things are being speedily repaired and we're maintaining our infrastructure and our equipment and so on. Just a couple of quick questions. The annual valve actuating program, I wanted to know what that entails and why we do it annually. And also just a question on the very last part of the report, which is our high water loss index. And I just would like to know if we know what our loss index is. At FCM, I did attend a session, and there are some municipalities that are experiencing extremely high water loss, which is really money and water going down the drain because it's not being used or charged for. But just those two items, the annual valve actuating program and our high water loss index, or what our water loss index is.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship, through you to Councillor Melnick there. So the annual valve actuating program, the reason why we do that yearly is essentially it's anything to do with like our automated systems and just to ensure that they're functioning correctly with our valves. It was very interesting. I'll share a story. I was driving out in the community. We were checking on something else, and we actually had a contractor in to do a different part there, and they were able to unseize a valve that had been seized for longer than anyone in our water department has even worked for us there. And we do have one staff member that's been with us since they were a parks employee. So we're getting more creative with what we're doing, but just making sure the valves are functioning in good condition there. In terms of the second, I don't have the most recent percentage, but I do know that our water loss is quite high. And one of the challenges that we have in Jasper is that our ground is so porous, so that when we do have leaks, traditionally it's been very difficult to know if we have breaks in our components there or our portions. Now, one item that I did allude to here, which is our water meter replacement program. One of the neat things once we have all of these new water meters online is that they actually will have a capability within it where it'll sense water loss within certain zones. So we can actually set that up through the water meters themselves rather than installing different equipment or technology in which to sense that. But I do know that we have done different efforts throughout the last few years here, specifically related to water loss to try and mitigate that. But we're hoping that we can utilize this or leverage this new technology that we have with the water meters as well.
Thank you for that.
Councillor Waxer.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. Through you to Director Donaldson. It's very encouraging to see that the local fixed rate boardings are up by such substantial amounts. And I just wondered if you, so I'm very grateful to your team for this, but I wondered if you had any sense, because those are dramatic increases, if you have any sense of what has led to this increase.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor Waxer there. I think it could be a multitude of reasons. One item that we've been focusing on heavily is reliability and frequency when it comes to our transit system. So ensuring that we do have that predictability when it comes to users, that's a large portion of it. So if you recall back when we had our town loop, I think it was just over a year ago, we were offering one offering a day, right? And that's not predictable for people, and they can't use that to get to and from work. So now where we're seeing an increase in ridership, an increase in routes, that's enabling us to have that predictability factor. And when we do have, apps like the Passio Go, which are now included on both of our buses, that enables us to have people track that virtually, so they know when that can be anticipated. So I think those items definitely help. I would like to also think that there's a little bit of responsiveness too when it comes to customer service. We've really focused on being extra responsive, especially around when it comes to summer schedule shifts, or the summer schedule and the winter schedules. Just enabling that, and also empowering our contractors too, because we have 2 contracted service providers to really provide that level of service as well that we expect working for us.
Thank you. And my second question is regarding the fleet technician position. 2 years is a long time to be recruiting for that kind of a position. I wondered whether it is across the province a challenge to recruit for these types of positions, or if there some of our unique characteristics like housing shortages and that have led to the long recruitment period.
Thanks, Mayor Ireland, and through you to Councillor Waxer. Yes, this is a province-wide concern, more so here than I feel anywhere else. We have done surveys on salaries. We have done different analyses. If we even look at the town of Banff, I think their posting was up, and they have many on staff, and they're only an hour away from Calgary, and they had difficulty recruiting just as a comparable there. But we're seeing it in major centers as well. And we could argue that that's an issue you're seeing across all the trades, but more so within heavy duty mechanics for some reason. Don't know the root cause of that, other than, we would probably need more apprentices in general and better apprenticeship programs. But I'd be hypothesizing a bit more if I gave you any other answer there. So it's a bit of an unknown.
Director Donaldson, I'd just like to go back to your response to Councillor Waxer about responsiveness within the transit system. And apart from changes at the scheduled times, fall and spring, how capable are we of being responsive to customer feedback on a quicker timeline? And I know we had a piece of correspondence on our agenda earlier today, someone who was appreciative and laudatory, in fact, of our transit system, but in another email had suggested some changes and then expressed some disappointment that they can't happen until, say, after the school year. And I appreciate that with the school transit portion, we are fulfilling a requirement of the Grand Yellowhead Regional School District, so that's up to them. But with our own management, do we have any ability to be responsive outside the change of schedules in the fall and the spring?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. There, we do is the answer. The question is, do we want to? And I think that's more of a fundamental question as to if we were to adjust the schedule every time we receive a piece of feedback, that could become quite cumbersome. And I know, we definitely appreciate the feedback. We track every single piece of feedback that we get, every single issue that goes into our issues log, any type of concern with a contracted service provider, that also gets logged. So I do think we do a very good job at identifying trends, and we utilize that to build out our schedules. We do a heck of a lot of engagement on a continual basis. So this was the first piece of feedback we have received related to the school schedules on this particular route. So with that said, could we make the change? Potentially. I think we just need to be careful about the changes that we do, because we put messaging and information out there for the broader public in which they're planning and stuff. And so that just would require extra communications out to people to ensure that there's not mass confusion if we are changing it more often than that expectation of twice annually.
Right. Well, appreciated. And I echo Councillor Waxer's comments about how favorably we receive the information about increased ridership. And I will credit the responsiveness that your department has to public demand that helps drive that ridership. So thank you for that. I had one other question, nothing to do with anything on your report, but it has come to my attention through community discussions that the municipality is looking at realigning, at least potentially, parking in Block S along that relatively new parking lot on the street side from parallel parking to angle parking. And I have to say, I was both surprised and pleased to see the change to angle parking along Pyramid Lake Road that obviously added a lot of additional parking and didn't restrict transit or travel at all. In respect to Block S, can you just confirm that whatever changes that you're doing there, there has already been proper consideration given to emergency vehicle access and whatever other large vehicles might be using that outside loop of Block S? All of that has been taken into consideration in whatever plans you have to change the parking.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Your Worship. I would like to say we have done a thorough analysis. So as part of some of the recovery work that we had to do in there, we had to redo a drainage plan, and then that morphed into, well, while you're doing that, let's take a look at some of the parking, because that actually posed some problems for our rebuild drainage considerations. And so we elected to utilize this small portion just to increase parking density. And with that, yes, we have increased the parking stall amount, I think, by 14 stalls in that one section. And the minimum fire access requirements require a 6-meter width. This has an 8-meter width in this one particular area. So we're well beyond by about 2 meters. It will require shifting the center line about 1.5 meters over from where it currently is. There's not one painted, but if you can visualize it, it'll be about 1.5 meters over. And we're going to see how that works. So rather than going in and actually redoing all the parking in there, we're going to try this one area, increase that ability, and see if that helps with some of the congestion in there, because I've driven through there quite a few times in the last couple of weeks just to get a sense of that and how that works. And where we're really seeing the congestion is at the far end of the loop. There just tends to be a lot of larger vehicles and stuff down there. So we don't see there being any access concerns coming from this adjustment.
Thank you very much for that. Other questions for Director Donaldson? Deputy Mayor Conscript.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland, through you to Director Donaldson. Do you have a time frame when Block S might be delineated and organized so we can enforce the regulations and parkings and carrying ons?
Thank you, Mayor Ireland, through you to Deputy Mayor Conscript there. If you're referring to all of S Block, I'm unsure of that timeline, but it is definitely on the TAC committee's radar. So we want to start with this, see how this works. In terms of the line painting for this, it should be happening later this week. So notices should have gone out today to impacted individuals along that stretch. And we're hoping to get it done weather dependent later this week. So it's gonna, if we have rain, it might go into early next week.
Thanks for that.
If there are no further questions for Director Donaldson, I would look for a motion to receive her report for information. Councillor Frechette, thank you. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Thank you, Director Donaldson. That takes us to agenda item 6.3, legislative committee terms of reference. I don't believe this has been before council before, these terms of reference. The terms of reference were initially approved by council, so there has been discussion at the legislative committee to change the terms of reference. But the committee is not able on its own to do that. Only council can do that. So it is here before council. You did see the minutes of the most recent legislative committee on the agenda earlier today. I don't have a recollection of whether the terms of reference were here prior. I don't think so, because the committee only last met a week ago. But in any event, revised terms of reference have been discussed at that legislative committee, and you can see the changes that are proposed. And rather than I can let Mr. Given detail it.
Sure, Mayor Ireland, I can maybe provide just a little bit of a high-level overview. We don't have a version of the old or the existing terms of reference for easy cross-referencing. So maybe I'll just speak to some of the main changes. Under the purpose and responsibilities of the committee, previously the committee was specifically looking at the procedure bylaw. That work is underway. Administration is going to be bringing that forward. And so that's nearing completion. And I think the committee saw fit to remove that as a specific to-do item in its purpose. It also previously had some language around researching and reviewing governance best practices from other municipalities. And there was a discussion at the committee that that's something that you as council members are often doing. I know many of you all of you, I think, went to FCM. You were probably researching governance best practices right there and then. And so it was sort of seen that that's something that council does as a matter of regular business and doesn't need to be specifically provided to this committee. There is a real focus in this terms of reference on three main things: identifying, reviewing, and recommending agenda items for our intergovernmental meetings with Parks Canada. Those occur quarterly. And administratively, it's always been a little bit of tends to fall through the gaps, frankly. An agenda will come up and we'll say, oh, what should we be talking with Parks about? And it seemed like this is a good function for the committee to meet in advance of that, to identify topics that council might wish to have, to recommend them to administration so we can forward them into the agenda for intergovernmental meetings. And then there are two functions related to the associations that we might be a participant in. So you're at FCM recently, but all of you have also attended the Alberta AB Munis or convention, and you would have seen that there are resolution sessions that go on. One function for the committee might be to identify potential resolutions the municipality of Jasper might like to take forward. So if there's something that's important to Jasper that we want to have a resolution on, the committee would work on that or could identify those things. And two, in advance of those conferences, when they publish a resolution book that has all these different topics that you might be asked to vote on at a convention, what should be the position of the municipality of Jasper? In the past, council members have arrived at the conventions, you get the convention book, and I guess you have a discussion at the table about how council feels about an individual resolution. This would add a little bit more process to that, where the committee would review the resolution book and would provide advice to council, so that when you show up at convention, you'll have a little bit of a more grounded sense of the relevance of a particular resolution to Jasper. So really focusing on those three things, agenda items for intergovernmental meetings, and identifying resolutions for submission to the conventions, and then reviewing all of the ones that are submitted and giving council recommendations. The other significant change was that the meeting schedule, in the existing terms of reference, the committee meets monthly. In this recommendation, it's to meet quarterly, 2 weeks in advance of intergovernmental meetings. So there's that alignment of the work of the committee around reviewing and identifying agenda items for intergovernmental, and aligning its meeting dates to go just in advance of the intergovernmental meetings. Mayor Ireland, I think if there are any other changes, they were not particularly material in nature. I think that covers the main ones.
I think it does, yes. Are there any comments or questions from councillors, including members of the legislative committee, if they wish to pose? And if not, if councillors are satisfied, I would look for a motion. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. I would make the motion that council approve the updated terms of reference for the legislative committee of council as presented.
Thank you for the motion, Councillor Hall. Does anyone wish to speak to the motion? Seeing no hands, I'll call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. That takes us to agenda item 6.4, welcoming week. This was before Committee of the Whole last week. There was a motion to approve subject to one change, which has been made. So the proclamation is before council for approval today, and welcoming week began on the weekend. And Councillor or Deputy Mayor Consgrud and I were able to join celebrations in Commemoration Park on that day to kick off the week. So I would look for a motion regarding the proclamation. Councillor Waxer.
That council proclaim June 14th to the 20th, 2026 as welcoming week in Jasper.
Thank you, Councillor Waxer. I see no hands for discussion. I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Also coming before us from last week's Committee of the Whole meeting is agenda item 6.5, the Planning and Development Advisory Committee membership in response to a request in the form of a letter from the Field Unit Superintendent of Jasper National Park. This comes before council by way of recommendation from Committee of the Whole. And if there are no further questions or comments with respect to our recommendation to ourselves, then I would look for a motion. Councillor Roger.
The council accept the Jasper Field Superintendent's invitation for members of council in their individual capacity to serve as members of the Planning and Development Advisory Committee, and that the mayor identify the 5 individuals to serve as regular members of the committee, 2 individuals to serve as alternates on the committee, and the chair of the committee.
Thank you, Councillor Roger. Does anyone wish to speak to the motion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. That motion directs that the mayor will identify 5 individuals to serve as regular members of the committee, 2 individuals to serve as alternates on the committee, and 1 person to serve as chair of the committee. So I will identify Councillor Fougere, Councillor Roger, Councillor Hall, Deputy Mayor Conscrewed, and Councillor Waxer to be the regular members of that committee. I will identify Councillor Melnick and myself to serve as alternates on the committee, and I will identify Councillor Hall as chair of that committee. And just speaking to that last appointment, Councillor Hall has, as have others, but not all of council, taken the governance courses. Then I can't even remember the name of them, but she has successfully taken those courses and is our serving member of the Assessment Review Board, which, although not the same, is similar in scope. And so it seemed to me to be a good fit to appoint her chair, and that will last until the organizational meeting in the fall when we reappoint. But this will now be something new added to the list of appointments to be reviewed in the fall. So that is done, and thank you all for agreeing to those assignments. Also coming before us from last week's Committee of the Whole meeting is the Information Technology Acceptable Use Policy. This comes to Council again by way of recommendation from Committee of the Whole. And if there are no further questions with respect to the policy, I would look for a motion as recommended. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. I would make the motion that Council approve policy B127, the Information Technology Acceptable Use Policy, as presented.
Thank you for the motion. Does anyone wish to speak to the motion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Takes us to agenda item 6.7, Regional Assessment Review Board appointments. Again, same status, coming to us by way of recommendation from Committee of the Whole. And again, subject to any questions or other comments that councillors may have, I would look for the 2 motions to appoint the designated clerk and the designated chair. Councillor Waxer.
I'm happy to make those motions, and should I do one at a time? Yeah, okay. Oh, and I guess they're written together. That Council appoint Melissa Delorme from the town of Hinton as the designated clerk for the Regional Assessment Review Board for West Yellowhead for a 1-year term starting June 16th, 2026.
Very timely motion.
Yes.
All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Go ahead, Councillor Waxer.
That Council appoint Lila Moselle from the town of Hinton as the designated chair for the Regional Assessment Review Board for West Yellowhead for a 1-year term starting June 16th, 2026.
Thank you for that motion. I'll call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. That takes us to agenda item 7, notices of motion, of which we have none. So we can move to agenda item 8, councillor reports. Councillor Fougere.
Yes, I attended the last community conversations for youth for the summer, before the summer break. There's a lot of very interesting programs planned for the kids throughout the summer. A lot of activities in the works. I also was a judge on Lemonade Day on June 13th. I participated in judging lemonade stands with two of the chefs from Pursuit, and it was a lovely day, and a lot of interesting stands were put together there. And just a reminder for everyone that the 24th of June is Stewardship Day, and I will be participating with the Community in Bloom Committee and doing some streetscape work, and hopefully we have a great turnout for all the plans that we have in the works. That's it for me.
Thank you. Other reports? Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. On Thursday, I attended the Recovery Advisory Committee meeting, and yesterday I had a Yellowhead Regional Library Board meeting in the morning.
Thank you. Councillor Roger.
I also last Thursday went to the Jasper Recovery Committee meeting.
Thank you. No other reports? It should have come at this juncture in any event, but I already mentioned Councillor or Deputy Mayor Consgrud and I attended the opening of Welcoming Week on Sunday at Commemoration Park. That then takes us to agenda item 9, upcoming events. There is a long list of upcoming events, which I won't read. But is there anything upcoming which should be brought to council's attention that is not otherwise on the list? And if there is not, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Councillor Waxer.
I bring this up just because we've had conversations at the council table, but I believe that there is an insurance law firm that is offering a session that will be available at the Moline Range on the 23rd during the day, I believe between 11 and 3, for those affected by the 2-year limitation on insurance.
Thank you for mentioning that, Councillor Waxer. I think it's noon till 3, but you are correct. It is Tuesday next week at the Moline Range, and it is free. So just an information session for anyone who wishes to attend. All right, I see no other hands indicating other upcoming events, which takes us to agenda item 10. Councillor Frechette.
Yes, I would make the recommendation that there being no further business, the regular meeting of June 16th, 2026 be adjourned.
At 4:48 p.m.
4:48 p.m. Thank you, Mayor. Okay.
All those in favor? Even the one who made the motion. There are none opposed. That is carried. We are adjourned. Thank you all who tuned in today and stayed for the duration. Very much appreciated. And thank you to those who will watch later on our YouTube platform. And we are now adjourned, and we'll be back Tuesday of next week at 9:30 in the morning for Committee of the Whole.